Welcome back to Old Guy REI. It's time for the weekly Zoom call highlights for October 30th, and it's still going strong. We had a couple new people join us that night, Mikey, so that was nice to see. Um, the meeting started off really quickly. We didn't get much time to chit chat. We got right into it right away with one of our one of the attendees talking about how he's joined some Facebook groups in the market that his property is in to try to build a team of contractors and handymen and things like that. I thought that was pretty smart. Have you done that? You're in Pittsburgh. Have you done any of that in your market?
I'm more of a lurker, so I like the Facebook groups a lot, the contractors, the investing groups. So it is really good because you can save posts, you can kind of look at the comment section, see which contractors are recommended more than others, and then you can save those posts. So I really like the group section, and I pretty much created a Facebook account specifically for real estate investing, and it's a good resource.
Yeah, some of the other spots people have been looking are like local. There's local apps and things like in our area. There's one called Nextdoor, and it's a platform for people in a few different towns around us. And a lot of times we'll see recommendations that they have for, things like painters and landscapers and things like that. So that could be a good resource to reach out to as well if you have one of those in your area. I was actually thinking about that since the meeting because Millennial Mike, he started the Facebook group for Gary, Indiana. And uh, since we're in school and on all these other platforms, I thought it would be cool to start one for St. Louis. So that's on my to-do list. And we'll see how that gets going because there are a few other investors that are in our meetings that are in the same market. So that might be helpful for them and for us as well to get connected with some other contractors. I've been having to look for some on my own. A lot of the work that we're getting estimates from our property manager on in St. Louis, the bids are pretty high, and I've been able to save some money by hiring my own people. Um, but I started with the Better Business Bureau in St. Louis and found an electrician that's going to check out one of our properties this week, things like that. So the Better Business Bureau is good. Sometimes if you have like a contractor's state license board, they have a website as well, and you can find contractors through there too.
Yeah, your stories of how you're able to work with your realtor and then also, she's sharing her resources with you, and then just the gap that you have between, one quote compared to another. And then the work is still, the materials are similar and the work is similar. So it's like if you can save that much money, that's a great job. And you're just building your team, expanding your network.
Yeah, and that led the conversation into, um, once you find a contractor, and sometimes things go really well in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it just changes. And um, I have had experiences in the past where that has happened with some subs, not for me, but for other people I know that were working with someone, and all of a sudden the work just soured and weird things, because they're just people too, but maybe they are going through a divorce or something weird like that, and they just lose it, can't concentrate on work and things like that, or heaven forbid they fall into doing drugs or something like that, and I've heard of that happening as well. So that's out of our control, but it does happen. And also, one topic that came up under the same heading was personalities, because as investors, we see some investors out there who don't have the greatest personality to begin with, and then sometimes they wonder why they can't hold on to a contractor. But as a contractor myself, if I start working with someone, and these days I have a pretty good, I guess, spidey sense about things like that. So if I just get a weird feeling about the person, I'll just shy away from it and not accept any work from them in the beginning. Sometimes they get past me and I won't learn until I'm actually starting the project that they're maybe not mentally stable, for lack of a better term, but sometimes you just do a few jobs for a person and everything's going good. We talked about, getting referrals. So you have a client and everything's great, and then they refer you to a friend. So me personally, I really try to please the friend just as much as I did my original client, because you don't want that to, any negative feedback to get back to the original customer.
And that was a good story that you told about the one customer who said, "Can you sharpen your pencil?" That was really interesting to hear because, you know, maybe that's not the best way to talk with a contractor, especially someone as busy as you. You have that track record and you have all your customers and you're booked out for years. So with that, when someone comes back and says that is, it's kind of like, I don't think we're going to work well together.
Yeah, there have been a few cases like that, and I did mention that I guess it's one of my pet peeves. But if somebody ever says that to me, they're not getting any work from me. And the other thing that people used to say back in the old days was, give me your best price because I have a lot of work. And so I used to think, well, if I'm going to do this work for too cheap, why would I want more work from you? So that's another thing that makes me take a sharp right. They and that also led then to the next topic of, once you do find a contractor, if you're investing remotely, how do you check the work? How do you make sure that they're doing what they say they're going to do and things like that? And I had talked to another investor, and she was telling me it must be nice to have my experience, because then I know, you know, how the work's supposed to be done. And she said even when the contractor sent her pictures that the work is complete, she still doesn't know what she's looking at. So I'm sure it's really hard for people that don't have any construction background or experience. But one of the thoughts I had during the meeting was, and I do it sometimes too, I'll just go on YouTube. If I need, just say, to hang drywall or hook up a sink drain or anything like that, people can go on there now and see how it's supposed to be done. At least when they get the pictures, they can have something to compare it to see. And you and I are kind of lucky because we have property managers, and the property managers are going to kind of follow up and make sure things were done properly as well. So that's a good resource for us. But not everybody has that, because if they self-manage or something like that, they wouldn't have an extra pair of eyes.
Yeah, and just helping me get started. You've been a huge resource where I can ask your opinion on maybe home inspections I'm seeing or maybe contractor quotes I'm seeing. And you've given me such a level up in terms of how I communicate. And maybe if I want to write an email, you'll say, mention these type of alternatives. That has really helped me just showing the contractor that, hey, I at least I know a little bit, and then that'll help maybe further down the line, at least what to expect of me and what I expect of them.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because the better you can keep up in the conversation, it's kind of like we've talked about with real estate investing, right? In the beginning, we didn't even understand the language or the terminology, but now that we've been in it for a few years, we can keep up. And you mentioned it the other night. You went to a meeting and you were able to keep up with the conversation, when a few years ago you'd have been totally lost.
But I'm amazed because it is like when sometimes when you're talking about the garage rebuild, it sometimes sounds like you're talking in another language. I still have to ask you questions because, nothing will compare to, 3 decades of knowledge compared to what I know.
Yeah, and we're always happy to help. I had a couple people reach out from our last video, and that's always really nice to be able to explain a little bit better what I'm talking about and how what products we use and things like that. And this has all been a learning process, so we're hoping in the near future we can post links to the products we're using and the tools that we're using and things like that. So we'll shoot for that in the near future. But the conversation kept going in that direction, and one of the other investors in the Florida market was getting multiple bids for some electrical work that they're doing, and I was telling him that getting multiple bids is useful because he was seeing with every contractor that he met, each contractor came in with a different point of view, a different level of experience, and they were pointing out different things that he hadn't considered up until that point. So it was going to help him make a better decision on the project overall on how far he wanted to take it. So I think that was great. We also had another investor that does the pad split strategy. And he was talking about the last couple of months had been a little bit down for him because one of his tenants or members, as they call them in that platform, was a bad apple, and that person was causing problems. So a few of the other tenants left. So his income or his revenue was down for a couple of months. But now that he got that person out, things were filling back up for him, and he was having a good month.
And his due diligence was great because he continually was looking into things, investigating, and finally he just had to go in, due diligence himself, and figure out what was going on. Then he found it, he resolved it, and now it's made it all better for his portfolio.
Yeah, he was saying nobody that was leaving wanted to tell them the real reason why they were leaving until that one last person luckily told them, it was a certain member that was causing all the problems. So if he hadn't done that, if he hadn't gone there himself, then um, it would have taken him a lot longer to resolve the issue. And he's out of state too, right? The pad split is in Arizona and he lives in Oregon, so he has to fly down whenever he has to do something like that. We talked about a couple of other things that evening, um, and somebody had mentioned wanting to look into other markets. If you were going to change markets, what would your first step be? Trying to build a team or find a property manager or find an agent? Where do you think you would start?
I would kind of copy what the REI Ventures talk about and maybe try to reach out to other investors and see who's someone in the community that I relate to, that we have a good kind of one-on-one conversation with, and maybe pick their brains saying, hey, would you mind me looking into your market, seeing if I'm able to tap your resources and just kind of get a feeling on that, see how that goes.
I think that's good because you mentioned some people have reached out to you about your Pittsburgh market, right?
Yeah, and I'm happy to share what I've been through, all the mistakes I made, if it helps them out in any way. And maybe if I kind of tell them my story and maybe they they don't want to invest because of some of the numbers I'm sharing, or maybe they don't really like the older housing stock. Yeah, I'm happy to share if anyone has questions.
That's one thing that came up for me in the past. When we talk about setting aside reserves, I always had a number of 15% for CapEx maintenance and vacancy, but somebody had mentioned that maybe we should adjust that depending on the age of the homes that we're investing in, which made a lot of sense. And I know in your market, the homes are mostly older. We have one that was built in 1904, I think, but everything else is newer. Um, Most of our stuff in St. Louis is in the 50s, but that was really true. But also in our case, when the stuff that we've been buying, we've been fixing it up, new roofs, new water heaters, a new furnace if it's necessary. So after we do that, I think I'm happy keeping the 15% so that because I don't think we're going to have any major expenses since all the big stuff's already been fixed.
I'm the same, and I stick with 15. but I also like to have a little bit healthier reserves, maybe to offset that a bit. I don't know if that's right, but that's kind of just how I'm operating right now.
Yeah, it hasn't really been put to the test yet, but that's a good point. We've said before that we like to keep 10,000 per door, and if we have to use part of the 10,000, since we don't have to live off the cash flow right now, all of the cash flow and the reserve money goes back into the account to replenish it. But once we do retire, then that would be a little bit different. So it's a good experiment to see, how fast will the 15% refill it. Um, Otherwise, we might end up increasing those reserves. But I guess you won't know until you try it.
Yeah, it is interesting how you hear everyone have their own kind of reserve number. I know Zuber and Matt, they're in the 50,000 range with how many units they have. And Dion is maybe in the 20,000 if I remember right.
I think he said once he quit working, he took it up to 30,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if it was 30 until he quit working and then he bumped it to 50. But I know he increased it once he stopped working.
Yeah, and it's good to hear from other investors like they have their own number. Whatever helps you sleep at night is the way to go. Whatever makes you more comfortable, more safe, then that's the way. That's the number you decide on.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel too. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Um, some people don't like to have that much money sitting in the bank, when they could put it to work in another property because, like we've learned over the years, with it sitting in the bank, it's just losing value. And that's a hard thing to swallow as well. So I'm looking forward to the next meeting. Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we finish?
There, there was an interesting thing about blockers in your life, and maybe as you're going through things, maybe you have a significant other and they're not fully 100% on board. It's good kind of to talk about those things, and maybe in the beginning, the other person isn't really on board with you, but if they see the dedication you're putting in, if they see month on month, I'm not giving this up, this is something I'm going to stick with, maybe it kind of changes their mind, or they see the rent checks come in, or whatever type of compounding interest you have in your skills or the knowledge you're gaining or whatever comes up. I think over time, hopefully they see that and maybe they turn things around and they come and be more supportive towards you, or they take a more interactive in helping you invest. Well, whatever it is, it's good to see a blocker go from that into someone more cooperative and willing to participate.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. I think that it could be super difficult for someone to do on their own. And someone in the group mentioned, I think her husband didn't really care one way or the other about her investing, but was helpful in other ways, like helping with the accounting part of it. At least that's a little bit of help. And then some of the other, they're mostly the men where that the wives they don't have much interest in investing. But I think it depends on the guy too, because if we have a record of starting something
Yeah.
and not finishing it, the wife's just going to think it's just another one of those things, and it'll pass soon. But one of the members mentioned that he sold one of his favorite hobbies to prove to his wife how serious he was about investing, and she's actually going to come to Vegas with him in February. So that that's nice. I think if you have someone in your immediate circle to support you, it's huge. But I also let them know, until their spouse or friend is on board, we're all here for them, and they can call us or talk to us as long as they want to, and we'll listen because we're going through the same things that they're going through.
And that was a big takeaway I had was that one investor, she said she comes to the meetings, maybe she doesn't have, maybe she has that blocker right now, but she comes to the meetings to kind of get that support that she needs and gets the questions, the discussions of investing that she needs to help her out to continue on the journey. So that was a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, and I think it's huge because now in the school community, she's gotten some things rolling, for female investors, moms, and things like that. So I think that's a different level of support. If you're a woman, a wife, a mom, and you're doing all this stuff, it's nice to hear from other women in the same situation. I think that's even more helpful than our meetings, because it's a total mix. I think the ratio is probably what 25% female and the rest are men. So I think for them to have a space that they can go to and be the majority is going to be super powerful. And I mentioned that, they're going to leave us guys in the dust pretty soon if they get rolling. So
I
that'll
like
be nice to see.
I do like that quote, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. Until our next highlight meeting, we'll see you out there in the chats.
All right, see ya. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.